Hey everyone, thanks for joining us in our healing series today. Let's see if we can get our special guest in. Awesome. Go. Awesome. Hey Francis, thanks for joining everyone. All right. Awesome. Hi Christina. Just sent you an invite to join us on the chat. See if you can try again. There we go. Send request. See you in a bit. Hello, welcome. Just waiting for Christina to join us shortly. Let's see if we can get her on. There we go, send request. Waiting for a special guest. Thank you for joining us. We'll start in a bit. Hi.
Hello, it works.
Yes. Thanks for joining, Christina. So nice to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank everybody for being here in New York Yoga Life magazine. We started a healing series with IG Lives happening every Friday, celebrating the magazine that we just launched earlier in the year. So there are lots of great presenters, contents, and you're one of them. This is amazing to have you here. The topic of today is one of the features on the magazine of the healing issue called the Floral Heart Project. And Christina Oliva here is the founder of the Floral Heart Project. And we're just going to talk about a little bit of what it is, a little bit behind the inspiration, and just a little bit knowing a little bit about you, Christina. I hear that you're an artist, you're a writer, you're also in the tech industry, which is so like opposite polars when it comes to artistry and technology. So love to hear a little bit about you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. Where would you like me to start? I'll start us about talking about the Floral Heart Project because on Monday, we're actually going to do something that I'm super excited about. So an organization called Marked by COVID has been really lobbying nationwide for the creation of a COVID Memorial Day. And that was driven in large part just we have seen so much loss. We have seen so much grief. I don't think anyone thinks that we're out of the woods in terms of the people that we will lose, but I think it's so important for us to start the conversation around memorial and more than anything, and I think this really dovetails into why I started the Floral Heart Project, is we need to create spaces for people to feel like they can grieve. I think one of the hardest parts of the experience we've had over the past year is people feeling so isolated and so alone. And the very end of last April, I was certainly feeling this, right? I was based in New York City and feeling just the grief of the community around me. And so I looked around and I was so confused why we didn't have visual symbols of loss, why we didn't have flowers everywhere, why there weren't photos of the people that we have lost, why there weren't flags, sort of all of these normal sort of symbols of iconography that you would expect in a moment of trauma, right? Post 9/11, post school shootings, we see these sorts of things. But because we were trapped inside our homes, I think people really felt like maybe they couldn't go out and they couldn't mourn. And so what happened is all of these communities of people were at home alone, feeling really socially isolated, and more importantly, feeling like those losses weren't important or that they were so political that it was unsafe to talk about them publicly. And so when I started the Floral Heart Project, I didn't start it as a project. I just started it as oh my gosh, I feel so sad about what's going on, and I have so much grief, I have to do something. And so for me, that something was I went to Trader Joe's because it was the only place that was open, and I bought like all of the flowers that they had in Trader Joe's, and I was like, I'm gonna make something. And so I made this floral garland, and I went and I took it to Brooklyn Bridge Park, and I laid it there, and I was so nervous. I like wore a hat that covered my eyes, and I wore gloves, and I wore my mask, and I was like, oh, I think this is probably illegal. And
And
so
did
I
you go
went,
alone? Did you go alone or did
oh
you
yeah,
go?
and to lay this like thing on the street, I didn't know, I had no idea. I was like, thought I was gonna get arrested. And so I went and I laid this on the street, and I took one little photo, and then I walked away. And I was walking away, this runner ran all the way past and then came back and then knelt down in front of this heart. And I just thought, oh, that did something for someone. And that is what we need to keep doing. And then I shared the photo, and my people at my community were just so touched, where people were like, oh, this means a lot to me. We should, will you do more of these? And then I just started making them like every 4 or 5 days, and
Mhm.
just going and putting these around the city, because the response people had to doing it was just, oh, I feel seen, or
Mhm.
like, this just meant so much to me. Like, it just meant something to people. And I started to have to play around with this idea of like, why did this matter? What are we doing? Why are we making these?
Mhm.
And it started to occur to me that we just needed spaces to go where we felt comfortable, um, grieving, where we felt recognized, and more than
Mhm.
anything, I think where we really felt not alone. And so for me, this was about sort of this kind of love letter to the city, sort of a bit of like a blessing. Like, I had recently learned that anyone could give blessings, and so I like was sort of thinking about it as a way to kind of give a blessing. And then the project grew and sort of became a lot more formalized through a partnership with 1-800-Flowers, where they actually supplied all the flowers because it was bankrupting me. It was so expensive to make these hearts. And then we started to put it in places like Times Square, and to, to get permits and to do it much more officially.
Okay.
And
And you already had the communication with the community to participate. When did that come about?
so
Because you
that's, yeah, that's what
organically did
happened.
it. Hmm.
That's what happened in late September. Is I started to really connect with the COVID loss community because of this partnership. And so it was this chance to start to hold vigils, and
Hmm.
that was something I had never done. There's this wonderful woman, Fiona Tulip, and she's one of the
Yes.
organizers of Marked by COVID. And she reached
Hmm.
out to me, and she was like, I want to do a vigil, because she had lost her mom in Houston, who was a nurse. Her mom got COVID and then had passed away 1 week later. So it was a very quick experience. And she wanted to host a vigil, because in October there was a sort of a week around COVID memorials and COVID mourning. And then she reached out and she was like, well, would you bring a floral heart? And I was like, well, I was planning to do one here. And she sort of helped me really connect with the community. We had about 30 people come out, and it
Hmm.
was a chance to take the heart, which had been sort of like a space that was created, and then to start to use that space to do more. And
Hmm.
so we were able to tell stories, to have people tell their stories, their COVID loss stories, to lay this heart. We played music, and it was really a chance for people who had been so isolated to just have people hear their story. And I think that is one of these aspects of grief and healing that is so important. And what I've really learned is that I can't fix anyone's grief, right? I can't,
Hmm.
I am not a doctor. I can't stop anyone that we've lost to COVID. And I can't actually do anything to change that grieving experience. But what I can do is like help to make it okay to grieve in public, and then to listen to the
Hmm.
stories. And I think that is something that is so hard because we don't want to have to think about loss. We don't want to have to think about death, but creating space for us to share those stories and to talk about them, I think is really, really important. And so from that first vigil, we were able to continue them. We probably hosted 10 vigils together all around New York City. And then the project started to expand. And so we were actually able to bring it on January 19th, which was when the Biden administration held their moment of silence, all over we brought it to about 5 places around the country, to Dallas and St. Louis and Jersey City, where more people started to use these hearts as gathering spaces because they created a visual representation. They helped to sort of take a space and change the intent of this space. So when you put a floral heart in a public square, it's no longer a public square. It is a place for mourning, and it is a place for vigil. And so we were able to grow that on January 19th. And then on Monday, on March 1st, we will actually lay a little over 100, I think now 102 floral hearts around the country, which is really, really exciting because it's just helping the community to go through this effort together, and sort of having this coordinated floral heart laying has just astounded me because there are almost 100 and I think now like 170 volunteers who have taken what was just a really little idea, like was just, I needed to do something, so I started to do this, and now there will be 150 people around the country who are actually bringing these hearts to their communities, partnering with local florists, partnering with large florists as well, and hosting vigils and hosting memorials and hosting just chances to gather in a smart, socially distanced way. But that has really been this sort of really personally healing, like to talk about this idea of healing, right? It has been so healing for me to meet all of these people, to work with all of these volunteers, to be able to do something that really is hopeful on a national level. But it started with just like my little thing, right? And I think that is this really powerful lesson for everyone to think about when we're thinking about this idea of healing, which is that I think if you start out and you just want to do something that's maybe healing for you or healing for the people right around you, how just repeating that activity over and over again can have an impact you would never have expected. I certainly would not have expected for this to happen.
No, that's such an inspiring story, because you genuinely had this heartfelt feeling that you wanted to contribute back. How can I express myself? How can you do it in your unique way? And then it turns out that it unfolded into this experience that became much bigger than that. And here we are a year later, after 500,000 deaths from COVID, and still there's a lot of people out there that still need some closure, still need some healing. It's not going to end. It's something that we will continue to speak about and grant the space to the families, the communities that need us. And you're one of those people, influencers, impacting that. So, so thank you for that. But you mentioned Fee, which is so. So I'm in the running community, and Fee's in the running community.
Oh yes.
So yes, she has been an amazing advocate and creating brand awareness for COVID victims and what's happening out there. So big hug to Fee for that, because she's really putting herself out there to really shed some light and push for change and recognition that this is an issue we need to continue to fight for and bring attention to.
Sorry, I was just going to say on that point, I think her story is so amazing, and what she's doing is just so for people who don't know, so she lost her mom in Dallas and passed very quickly.
And then her mom was a nurse. She worked in the field So
Yeah.
she was in direct contact, and that could have been avoidable if there was an actual rule, law to actually have masks, that it was required for everyone to wear masks in
Yeah,
Texas. Hmm.
absolutely. And I think it's really, yes, and that is really what they're fighting for, right? Is now that we're there sort of we're coming out of this pandemic moment, right? Like by this time next year we will be in a really different place. And so we are
Hmm.
able to start to really advocate for this legislation and this change. But what is so interesting, I think, is she really started telling her story. The Marked by COVID community really started telling their story very early and very quickly. And
Hmm.
there was, I think there's this very interesting thing, particularly around the idea of memorial, where we think it's like something that we do after, right? That it is like after this is over, we will talk about people's families and we will make change. And I think that idea is so sort of ill-informed or just not terribly empathetic to what has actually happened. So, we have like this is a thing that I sort of struggle with all of the time, which is when I started making these, people were like, oh, it's too early. You can't make
Hmm.
memorials. You can't talk about memorial. And I couldn't really understand what people were talking about, right? And I think that's because in our culture, memorial has become something that happens like when we have fought and we have won the battle, right?
Hmm.
And so memorial really becomes a time of sort of like heroics to talk about, oh, these were all great heroes in our experience. The flaw in that, though, is that it doesn't give people space to grieve. And yet we sort of talk about memorials as a grieving space or a gathering space, but often memorials happen sort of 5 to 10 years after the event. The September 11th memorial didn't happen
Hmm.
until 2011, right? So by that time, you're so far through the grieving process that it really becomes more sort of like a symbol of strength than it becomes sort of a place of empathetic connection.
Hmm.
And so what I think we need to do, and one of the things that I think Fiona has done really well, is as it's happening, we
Hmm.
have to talk about and push for change in these moments. Um, and that's actually what really matters to people. Like that's what helps
Hmm.
them go through their grief. And that's one of the things about the Floral Heart Project that has been so meaningful and interesting to me, is that it's there for people when we need it, right? Sort of like when you are experiencing this loss and you need to have this conversation in this space.
And it also provides opportunity for not only those affected directly by COVID, but those that are affected by the collective trauma of the whole pandemic itself. Because whether it's from mental illness to just being that in isolation and not being able to share those moments as a community, you're giving that space for those people as well. So it's inclusive to everybody that needs that healing. And out of healing, we as we're healing is known as something that is, you're not a strong individual, or it's kind of like a taboo to be sad and you're not strong, which is quite the opposite. To actually acknowledge that you need to grieve, that you need to heal, that you're giving the space to talk about it, actually makes you pretty powerful, and you're pretty courageous to be in that space.
I couldn't agree more. One of the things I think we really have to think about from like a broad societal perspective is this idea that like people want to get on with their lives, right? People are like, okay, like there is a vaccine, we need to move forward, we need to move forward, we need to sort of build new solutions, etc.
Mm-hmm.
My big argument is that like that doesn't work if we don't actually go about healing the grief and talking about the hardship and all of the things that we have been through. So there's a bunch of research around this idea called disenfranchised grief, which is when we have delayed grief, right? Which we are having in this moment. We haven't been able to gather, we haven't memorialized. We've all sort of been like having a stiff upper chin and thinking that we can, make it through this. And that the way to make it through this is to be kind of like tough, right? But what happens then is that when the pandemic is over, that when we sort of allow ourselves to feel the grief or to feel the trauma, or whenever we allow ourselves to feel that, it comes with a heightened level of PTSD. And so corollaries like a Hurricane Katrina, you see that actually around 15% of the population have moderate to severe PTSD, meaning that they have anxiety, depression, drug and alcohol abuse, a heightened propensity towards physical violence. And that is so damaging for our society. So if we make it through this pandemic, which we will, sorry, I had a little pop-up.
I lost you.
We are in no way prepared to deal with the mental health crisis that we're going to have, this sort of grief crisis. And I actually think it's a much bigger deal than that, though, because I think largely what we're experiencing in America is actually a grief crisis across the board already. And I think when you're looking at a lot of things that are driving our politics, that are driving division in America, or largely sort of the emotional core of that is grief. It's grief that America isn't what you used to think it was. It's grief that you don't feel represented in America. It's grief that the American dream isn't your reality, right? All of those things are the emotional core of that. I think is that we just feel sad and grieving, and we've had no place to sort of talk about that or respond to that on a national level. And so what I really, when I think about this and I think about this need to heal and this need to respond to what's happening in the pandemic, I think becoming comfortable with grief is something that actually helps us in all of these different places. And if we don't talk about the grief, if we don't grieve, then we're just building America back on really shaky grounds, right? So like whatever we do, whatever we institute, if we don't talk about the core problem that is at sort of like the emotional dysfunction of America, then all the rest of it is just really nice efforts that are going to fail us across the board. And that I think is something we really need to struggle with.
No, that's so true and sincere, and embracing that vulnerability, and again, that shows strength and courage, to be quite frank, and that's what we need. Christina, I know you have a couple of projects that are happening. So you have the March 1st project that you mentioned. It's nationwide. How many cities are you targeting?
We have over 100 hearts being laid around the U.S. and everywhere, from Seattle to Dallas to Atlanta to D.C. to Chicago to Milwaukee to Phoenix, sort of all across the board. On our website, floralheartproject.com, you can find a map of all of the hearts. And we encourage people to go visit a heart, reach out to a local volunteer, find out if there is a vigil in your area. If you want to go to one, stop by and take a picture, or to just share on social media. I think so many people who have lost people in the community still don't feel comfortable going to anything in public, to leaving their homes, which is fair. We all need to be really cautious, but knowing that they're happening is such a balm for people. And I have people email me every day who are just so thankful that something is being done to recognize their losses. And so even just sharing the photos helps people to know that people care.
I really like what you said, when the community meets and we have families that want to share their stories in these particular events or memorials, is there a place where they are being shared? Is there an opportunity to create that space also to share your story? I think that is very inspirational and can also empower others to continue to share their stories as well, on a virtual standpoint. Because
there are a couple of organizations that are great at that. Marks by COVID actually does a lot of work with that. COVID Survivors for Change is an organization where people can also go to connect and share their stories. There's also the COVID Memorial Project, which shares stories of people that we have lost. And so there's a bunch of different organizations doing that work and doing a really amazing job.
Great. We'll make sure to share those organizations as well. I see Anna has a question here. How long do you envision the Flora Project to continue?
This is funny because someone just asked me this question yesterday and didn't have an answer. I want to bring floral hearts to anyone who wants to have them in their community. So as long as there is a need, I would like to help support that and help do that. And I don't know how long that goes or how it evolves. I'm just one person, so that has it's certainly become all the work I do all the time. But as long as I can, I will.
Oh, beautiful. So I actually have a friend that participated also in one of your LIC and I believe the Herald Square memorials, and she actually wanted to share something with you that she's here.
Hi,
Hi, how
how
are
are
you?
you?
This
Oh,
is where
I'm
I
good.
am when you asked if I could assist with the project in New York on email.
Oh, sorry. Wait, what did you just say?
When you emailed us the other day to help with the Floral Heart Project
Yeah,
in New York, and I'm in California, so therefore I cannot help. But I'm here, and I want to thank you so much for everything you've done. I just heard the end about the grief, and you really helped me bring my story out about my Aunt Mary, and you brought tears to my eyes because it's true. We held a lot of grief for a really long time,
yeah.
and you did a lot for me. So thank you so much. You and marked by COVID.
Oh, well. Oh, God. It's so nice to see you. Well, I want to know why you're in California, but anyways, probably because the weather's better, which I like totally understand. But yeah, when Susie shared her story, it was really you called your aunt your second mom, and I just that was so it was just so powerful to hear your story, and like you could feel just how much grief you had to just like that you had to carry, and that
And we haven't had, to your point, we haven't had, still to this day, she passed away on May 16th, and we still haven't been able to have a burial or anything, or a memorial with friends and family. But we plan to do that on her 1 year, hopefully, back in Massachusetts. Hopefully, my parents will be vaccinated and we can get together and bury her ashes. Um, and to your sorry, I was just thinking about that she was cremated when she would have normally been buried. So there was a lot to deal with at the time. And I held on to that story for months, from May until the summer, because we didn't have the first floral project that I attended till the summer. So I was scared to share the story. And so I have to have you to thank. And you shared the photos of my mom, her identical twin, and myself and her on Times Square, and that was really special. Sorry, I'm
yeah.
tearing
And
up.
you no, I like you were also featured in like a Biden ad
Yeah,
that they like somehow got
I
the
was.
footage from the event, which we don't know how that happened. And um yeah, I think you said something so powerful, which is also a term that I've heard other people say, which is like that there wasn't a safe place to share that story, that you didn't feel safe talking about it. And that just to me is this like horrible, like how come we couldn't have figured out something better, right? And like
Well, at
I'm
the
so happy
time,
that
yeah, as you mentioned, at the time we also had Black Lives Matter happening, and like there was so much grief and sorrow and emotions that it was just so much that like
so
you
much.
didn't know who to talk to about what and
Yeah.
what to post even on social media.
And I mean, yeah, I experienced that too, where I was like going to, and I made a floral heart at the Black Lives Matter moment, like during that time, and people were really angry about me doing that. That it was like to talk about COVID at the same time as we were talking about, like race in America and all of these huge issues. And I just think they're all so related, like all of, and our like inability to handle all of that grief and all of those conversations at the same time is extremely um, is extremely detrimental. But I think one thing that brings me so much hope is that you are planning like a 1-year memorial. And I think I'm sort of hearing about more and more people who are doing that. And I think like that'll just be so important across the country of like, how do we recognize people on the 1-year loss of their death, but also like, hopefully by May, you and like your parents will be vaccinated, like, but also there are still even then so many people who won't have been vaccinated who still aren't feeling comfortable leaving their homes, you know, and like
Yeah, I don't know who
that
will.
it's been
It
a
could
year.
just be me, my parents, and my uncle, her brother. But even if it's just that, at least it's something that we can do it together and bury her ashes with my grandparents. So
Yeah, and but like a whole year, to be able to do that is such a
yeah,
long. It's such a long time, and
yeah.
Thanks, Suzanne, for sharing your
Yeah,
story.
thank you. It was
sorry,
so
yeah.
nice to
Oh,
see
it's
you.
so good to see you. I know. I'll Instagram DM you as well.
I have to
I'm
go
just,
to a
like,
work
very
meeting,
excited.
but
Oh, and are you in LA?
San Diego.
Oh,
There's
okay.
one,
There's
yeah.
a Floral Heart Laying in LA on Monday, but I'll send you the link. There's some in California if you want to go to see any of them. So,
Yes, that would be amazing. Thank you so much, and thank you for everything you do.
oh, thank you. That was so.
Thanks, Suzanne.
I have so many emotions.
It just happened to be that, this wasn't really planned. We had scheduled our IG live a couple of weeks ago, and it just happens to be that Suzanne is my roommate here in California. And I remember her going to one of the events, and I'm like, hey, do you want to drop in and actually share your story? Because Christina's going to be on live. So thank you so much.
Thank you for coordinating that. That was so amazing.
Yeah.
It's such a small world, too.
Yeah, it is a small world. It is a small world. It kind of confirms how we're all connected and how we have to support one another, and again, how these spaces are just so important. So I just want to thank you, Christina. You've been so amazing to sharing your stories and what you're doing and how you're going to continue to do it. And I will definitely share the information on our New York Yoga Life magazine of how people can participate across the states to visit one of the memorials on that day and to continue to share these stories so that we can continue to heal as a whole. So appreciate you.
Thank you
so much for your time.
And
I look forward to continue following you and see the amazing things that you're doing for the community.
Same. You all are doing amazing work too. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.